the last 10 years, all kinds of relationships are being transacted less frequently. Fewer people are getting married at this country. Fewer people are entering into relationships. There's fewer even casual sexual relationships being transacted. Half the world's population lives in countries below reproductive rates.
Orion Taraban, my friends, the man with the coolest name to have ever appeared on this podcast. He is a licensed clinical psychologist, a content creator, and the man behind the very, very popular channel, PsycHacks. This platform is dedicated to practical advice for mental health, personal development, and this man is known to help people navigate life's challenges with clarity and confidence.
It's important for a woman to not just offer a sexual opportunity, but to be the nastiest, sluttiest version of herself possible. People don't like the idea of any men, let alone successful men, paying women for sex.
Today we deal with absolutely everything. How to be a man, how to get women, what you need to be doing in your life so you can succeed. This podcast is a banger, okay? Excellent guest. We're going to get you guys some more. Please check out everything from us right down in the description box. Check out thewayofwilljohn.com. Check out our Rumble. Leave us a like. Leave us a review. And we will see you guys later. Peace out. Enjoy the podcast.
Way of Will John.
I stopped watching the news maybe 15, 18 years ago. I made a conscious decision to let go of that. There was this pull inside of me that I hear from other people when I bring this up, and it's like, well, if I stop the news, I'm an irresponsible citizen. How am I going to be informed? It's my duty to know what's going on in my society. And I think that there is a little truth to that. I do generally know what's happening. I kind of get it secondhand through individuals. And once a story kind of trickles into me and to my awareness through various friends and acquaintances, then I'll look it up and do my own research. But on the whole, I don't follow the news, and I realized that whenever I was watching the news, I would end up feeling either angry or hopeless and depressed. And I realized that that wasn't really helpful for my mental health. I see all these terrible incidents happening around the world, and misery and death and catastrophe, and there was literally nothing I could do about it as a single person, and it just made me end up feeling worse than when I turned on the screen. So I think that information is useful as a precursor to action. Like, if you're going to learn about something, I think you should be prepared to do something with the knowledge that you've gained. However, I was just consuming the information, like I think so many millions of Americans, and it couldn't go anywhere. I had no power. I had no influence. There was nothing I could do to help these individuals on the other side of the globe. So I decided to really only limit myself and to care about causes that I was willing to actually do something about. And that's a tricky situation, because a lot of people want you to care about lots of things, right? But there are many things that I'm not willing to go to the barricade for and do anything about, so I don't care about them. It doesn't mean I'm against the movements per se, but it's more like I'm neither for nor against, and I only want to throw my hat in the ring when I'm actually willing to take a stand and do something about it.
I couldn't agree with that more. I have no idea when exactly I left, the news. But one thing that I'd add on to that is that you actually clearly don't want everyone caring about everything. We want you to care about men's mental health and how it's best for this. You want the soccer player to kind of be, hey, pay attention to your thing here, or the linguist, go pay attention to that. You want people to be in places where they can actually benefit the rest of the world, and that they're giving up of their best talents, and just consuming news and trying to care about everything. It's not, as you said, that you don't care about the rainforest. I don't know if you care about the rainforest or not, but someone else may be more adept at handling that issue and being a part of that and knowing about that. And I think that would build a better world.
That one I have cared about in the past, and I've put some money where my mouth is, and I've donated to some causes, because I went to Brazil a long time, about a decade ago. And so I did sort of care about that particular cause. I think it's also a form of responsibility for folks to kind of stay in their lane. Like, I want to resist the urge to become a pundit and to just opine on everything and everyone that's happening in the media. That's not really my forte. And I personally find it a bit infuriating when celebrities or actors or personalities decide that they now, on some level, have a duty to be a bellwether for contemporary events. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, of course, but I know ethically that I should stay within the bounds of my expertise.
Which is something, because this is the craziest start to a podcast that I've ever had. What is your expertise? All right.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Who are you?
My name's Orion Taraban. I'm a psychologist. I'm licensed in California, where I have a small private practice. You probably know me, if you know me, through my YouTube channel, PsycHacks, which I started about 3.5 years ago, where I talk about a host of issues that are inspired by my clinical practice. So almost all of my episode ideas come from discussions that I've had with actual clients or patients. I talk about all kinds of issues, but the episodes that seem to do the best are having to do with dating and relationships. I also wrote a book this year called The Value of Others. I have it right here. I self-published it. It's still in the top 10 in a number of relevant Amazon categories, which is just wild since I don't have an agent or a publishing house or a marketing team. I haven't spent a single dollar on advertisement. It's all through word of mouth. It's been a wonderful success, surpassing my expectations. So I have some measure of expertise with relationships. And when I was exclusively a therapist before I started the channel, I specialized in men's mental health. So all of my patients were men. So that's sort of my CV.
thewayofwilljohn.com, exclusive content and programs on manifestation, making money, hidden knowledge. Finally, reach your full potential.
So I'm gonna dive right into it. I have already mentally a checklist of things that I wanted to check out because I have seen your channel. But considering that you're within the dating game, we had on a guest. Her name was Blaine Anderson. Are you familiar with her?
I'm going to look her up real fast because that does sound familiar. I think I might have looked her up before. But I'm not familiar with her content.
Okay.
Looks like she has a pretty big following on Instagram in particular.
Very, very, very big following on Instagram. Very big following. I think overall, she was on Shark Tank as well after she had come on our show.
Oh, that's cool.
I think, yeah, doing all sorts of stuff. I think that's besides the point, because where I'm going with this is one of the top comments on her page's profile, as well as even on, I think, our podcast episode is, I think you don't, I'm going to butcher it because I may not remember it exactly, but you don't ask a fish how to catch itself, something to this term from men, essentially saying and stating that you wouldn't ask a woman how to pick up herself. She's not doing it. You ask, I don't know, kingfish, or ask a kingfisherman.
The kingfisherman, yeah. Don't ask a fish how to fish.
Don't ask a fish how to fish. There you go. Do you find any worth in thinking like that, or do you feel that it's possible, obviously, that perspective can bring something? Would you rather have men getting their advice on how to be successful with women from women or from men?
I think that men should listen to other men who have been successful in that domain if they want to learn as a man how to be successful with women. That's not to say that women can't or don't provide useful information. I think that we should, on the whole, collectively move away from dismissing or accepting information based on the identity of the person who provides it, and be willing to listen with an open mind and to see if this checks out against our own experience, like a scientist. And if it works, keep it. And if it doesn't work, throw it out and keep moving forward. But to not necessarily write off someone completely just because she's a woman or he's a man. I do think that the main liability with, in my opinion, receiving dating advice from women, especially that's targeted towards men, is that women tend to leave out the most important part. I made an episode about this. It's called The Part That Women Leave Out. And I think all men at some point in their lives, when they're frustrated about their success with dating, they go to their mom, they go to their sister, they go to their female friends, they go to their aunts, and they say, just fucking tell me, what do women want? Because I want to give it to them. Like, I want to be the guy who can make the woman happy and get the relationship. Just tell me what they want and I can provide it, or I'll work on providing it. And when I did that when I was younger, the responses I got were, well, I want a man who's kind. I want a man who makes me feel safe. I want a man who's sweet. And I was thinking, well, what the fuck? I'm all three of those things, man. I'm sweet as fuck. I'm very safe. I'm not going to do anything bad, or I'm not one of those guys, right? And it was just, I wasn't getting anywhere. And what I pieced together over time was the part that women always leave out is that it's not that they don't want those things. They just want those things from the men they're already attracted to. They want the men they're attracted to be kind and sweet and make them feel safe. But if you're not attractive to that woman, you could be the sweetest, safest, kindest man in the world, and she's not going to want to date you. So as a man, it's important to learn what stimulates female attractiveness first and foremost. And to be honest, I think those are more important than being kind and sweet and all those things that women say, because I often believe that those traits are kind of like what was missing from the guy that they were attracted to, that they slept with or were in a relationship with in the past, that would have made him the perfect boyfriend or the perfect partner. Like, if only my ex were loyal, then that would be a perfect man. So they say, oh, I'm really looking for a loyal man. But clearly they're not, because they've messed with a disloyal man because he was attracted to her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it does. And what I wanted to even go further into, I mean, you just touched on, I believe let's say the characteristics that would make a man attractive to a woman. Given our base, what is it specifically? What sort of qualities should a man cultivate in order to be that?
This is tough, because when you start to talk about what is an attractive man, there's going to be individual women out there that says, this guy's full of it. I'm not attracted to that. And that's totally true. So what I'm going to be talking about is, like, in general, on a population level, there are certain things that, like, if we had two men and they were completely equal in all respects, but we just varied this one variable, we can pretty much guarantee that the vast majority of women will prefer that man over the other man who's is equal, except for that one difference. And I mean, the main thing that, first and foremost, women are attracted to, like, physically attractive men. Like, there's this idea that it's just men who are shallow and care so much about physical appearances. I do believe that men tend to care about physical appearances more than women, but women can be very open and available to men that they are physically attracted to. And so what is that? That means you're athletic. That means that you're tall. That means that you have some swagger or fashion sense. A lot of those things, not that height, obviously, are things that men can control. Like, one of the things I talk about is attractiveness generally runs the show in the sexual marketplace. But everyone can be more attractive than they currently are. Like, I could go to the gym and lose a couple pounds and put on some muscle. I can buy some new outfits, or maybe hire a coach to style me for certain appearances. Like, there's always things that you can do. And one of the things that I found that more than anything else seems to resonate with women is some measure of fame or reputation. And I talk about it in the channel in the context of being a contextual alpha, which basically means that if you can cultivate a scene or a community in which you're, as a man, at the top of the social hierarchy, that doesn't matter if it's just like your local church or your Dungeons and Dragons get together every Tuesday night. Like, if you're at the top of that social hierarchy, if you're bringing people together, if both men and women are looking up to you, you're going to be the focus of attention. And attention is something that is like an aphrodisiac to women. They want to be around men who can command attention for various reasons. Of course, the best way to do that is through social media in today's day and age.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It reminds me of, and I seem to be throwing a lot of names at you today. It's not normally like this, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. David Buss, or who that is.
Yeah. I'm a little late to the game. I read a number of his books for the first time this year, but he's excellent. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just recall, and I haven't read all of one of his books. The textbooks there are quite expensive, actually.
I haven't read any of the textbooks. There's a number of books that are written for popular audiences that I would recommend. The Evolution of Desire, I think, is his best-selling work, and I loved that. Like, every page was a corroboration of my ideas. It was
okay. What was it again? Could you tell me?
The Evolution of Desire.
Evolution of Desire. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I just remember status being high up on, like, that was the thing. I keep talking about this, that, and the other, and being status is one of those things that's very high up.
Status and fame aren't quite the same thing. Like, you can be high status without being famous. Being famous kind of already makes you high status, but like, some of the most powerful, influential men in the world, you could be sitting next to them on the bus and you wouldn't know who that person is. These are the guys who are on the board of directors at, Forbes 500 companies, or they're deal makers in Washington. They're the guys behind the guys behind the guys. So I also talk about that in the book. The most powerful people are invisible, because as powerful as power is, it's even more powerful when you can't see it, because you can't unseat something that you don't even know exists. So some of the most powerful people in the world and the most influential people in the world, you wouldn't recognize them. Versus there's some guys, 19-year-old guys who have 10 million followers on TikTok, obviously very famous, probably doing very well in the sexual marketplace. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's high status.
Okay. That's a great, I didn't necessarily recognize that delineation between the two, but yeah, it's clear. I mean, you touched on one of the subjects that's a fascination of this podcast as well, which is the hidden power and the hidden hands, because much like you said, yeah, if you can't see it, it's hard to strike. And you can wield a whole lot of more power, if I don't know where you are, especially if you're well-funded, well-resourced.
I think it's interesting that the most obvious feature of the Ring of Power in the Lord of Rings is it turns the wearer invisible.
Invisible. Yeah. Totally. Okay. Well, before I even get off this subject necessarily, you have another video that I haven't watched yet, but it has a great title. I know it's very popular. It's Get Used to Disappointing Women. And I mean, maybe you've touched on this subject just a little bit in what you said with, the nice guy and, the guy who may be dangerous, et cetera. But could you touch on, if you remember, the theme of?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think that's one of my best performing ones. It does have a provocative title, right? And the thesis of that episode is basically that when a woman loves a guy, she wants all of him. Like when a woman is in love, when she's 10 out of 10, she wants to be with him. She wants to be included as his plus one to everything. She wants all of his time. She wants all of his attention. She wants all of his body. And if she could, she might even want to crawl inside of his mind and know all of his thoughts and feel all of his feelings. Like, it's like that. But what I've discovered is that giving into that as a man, surrendering more and more of your time and your space and your attention to a woman, even though in the moment that might be what she wants, is ultimately self-defeating. Because on some level, what keeps people in relationships is not what they've already gotten. It's what they want but haven't yet gotten. And once you cede all of that ground, and that woman is in your house all the time, knows everything about you, where do you go from there? It can be difficult to keep the passion and the interest alive. And of course, as a man, I think that woman was attracted to you when you weren't giving her those things. It's not like you started off by giving her all of that time and attention. So that time and attention was not necessary for her attraction. She was attracted when you weren't giving her those things. And why? Because your time and attention was spent on things that were attractive to her, like your fitness and your businesses and your grind and your spiritual life and your hobbies. I think it's really important for men and women to more or less continue to do the things that attracted their partners to them in the initial courtship phase, because on some level, that's the foundation on which that attraction was built. And both parties mess with that to their great risk. And so when a man, I mean, these are finite resources. The time has to come out of somewhere. There's only so many hours in the day. And the more time you're giving to a woman, the less time you're giving to these other projects and other relationships, which actually undermines your long-term attractiveness. And there's no place to go from there. Like with women, it's kind of important as men to give them a very long runway, because you can't ever really go backwards with a woman. Like if you start right off the bat by seeing a woman like every night, I do consultations with the guys like this all the time. They meet some woman, he's really attracted to her, and within a month, they're seeing each other 6-7 nights a week. Maybe she's even moving in. Like, where do you go from there? Like, you can't ever at that point say like, hey, I'd like to only see you once a week. That's going to cause an argument. So you can always kind of accelerate the relationship, but you can't ever really move in the opposite direction. So with that in mind, if you're going for a long-term play, you want to give yourself plenty of room to maneuver.
One of the most important things that I have learned interviewing all of these high-performance leaders is that clarity of mind is crucial to your success. And what good is clarity of mind without clarity of sound? Which is why today's podcast is sponsored by Rode. We across Golarami use exclusively Rode audio equipment in order to do all of our stuff. If you are an influencer, if you're just a person out there trying to make some good content for your stuff at home, wherever it is, Rode is by far the best audio partner we have ever had. We have been using their stuff for almost 5 years now. Has never let us down. Truly incredible company, especially with all of the other affordable things that you guys can get from them. Check out the link right down below and enjoy the rest of this podcast.
What I'm most curious about within this, and I mean, you mentioned obviously the evolution of desire. Casanova, as a character, has mythological status, amongst us nowadays. There's someone I read a lot, right, and that may be evident now. But someone has written a book. I forget his name, and so, but I'm really curious about if there are these principles to men that are great within not just attracting women, being with women, being alpha males or high status or / having fame, all these. If there are these men that have this, this ability, is there some sort of natural pull, or is there a way, obviously, to cultivate this in any guy? Because you mentioned women like physically attractive males, but potentially males like that, the attraction part more. Could literally any guy, because this is part of what I see within, in doing research, obviously, for this and stuff like this, you see advertisements and things letting guys know, do this, do X, Y, and Z equals boom. Girls, limo, cash, the big time, And so I'm curious if you really believe, or if there's any research that would corroborate the idea that any man could change things drastically. Could it just be fame? Would that just do it? Or would you always have something that's holding you back?
Fame would work on a lot of people. There's nothing that works on everybody. I made an episode about this recently. It's called You Can't Get There the Same Way Twice, where I talk about success being a moving castle, that you can have repeat success. Teams win back-to-back championships. People have bestsellers as sophomore submissions. But if you try to repeat what worked the first time around, it's not going to get you the exact same results, because success is a castle that's moved. That pathway is no longer leading to the castle because the castle has wandered somewhere else. This is why the best advice is generally very vague and has to do with general principles, because the more specific you get, if you just say, well, what you do is you go up to a girl, you look her in the eye and go, hey, right? Like that will work with some people, but it will not work for a lot of people. So the more specific you get, the less likely that any tactic is going to work on a population level, and people are going to think you're full of shit. Though they're not going to stop shelling out money to gurus that promise that if you just follow this script, if you just follow this template, you too will have crazy optionality and millions of dollars in 6 months. Because look, it happened to me. Well, yeah, that's one way to do it. But like, even if that person tried to recreate that success now, it wouldn't work quite the same way, because the platforms have changed, the algorithms have shifted, the current market has altered. There's more competition potentially. Nothing is replicable. Now, the book that you might be thinking about is Robert Greene's Seduction, which is an excellent book.
It's not, but I've read virtually all of Robert Greene's book. Huge fan of his. But no, there's an actual a biography of Casanova.
I was gifted that by a girlfriend a long time ago. I've never read it, but I do think it's interesting that I think Casanova had around 120 lovers, which would probably just put him in the top 2% of men by today's standards. So he did very well for himself, but there are guys out there that are, have much higher numbers than that. And I think, of course, Casanova was limited by the mores of his time, and he really did have to spend a lot of time, be physically present with the women. It's very easy to seduce on scale with social media and technology. But this is what I want to say about this, Will, is that excellent book, Robert Greene's Seduction. And he talks about that there are archetypes to seducers. And I think it's really important, because there's not there literally are an infinite number of ways that you could seduce as a man, but we can say that they tend to group together into several identifiable constructs. And certain constructs will be better matches for the individuals involved. This kind of segues into game. I should probably do an episode about this. Like, there are several ways that guys can seduce women. One is to be kind of like fun and the party guy. Another one could be totally like stone cold and like the thug kind of a thing. Like, that would not look good on me. Like, that does work, but if I tried to be the thug, it wouldn't seem authentic, right? It would be tough for me to pull that off. I tend to do more charm and wit, and to engage a woman's emotions. It could also be like negging, cocky, and a little bit arrogant. Like, these things consistently work with women. No one approach will work on all women, but all those approaches will work on someone, and some of those approaches will work better for you as an individual man than others. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that authentic area, I think, is where, not just with women, but I think everywhere, is where the gold is, right? You know, I mean, playing to some script that you're not is not going to work when you're trying to give a public speech or not. But
well, this is important to say, Will, because it's unlikely for the vast majority of guys that they're naturally going to fit very closely one of those like 5 archetypes that I just rattled off. Now, does that mean that they're faking or lying or being inauthentic when they decide to say, okay, actually being the cold thug would fit best with my personality, so I'm going to lean into that? Like, you might have to like lean into one of these things and emphasize certain parts of your personality and lifestyle and let others kind of go into the background. And the more you do that, the more authentic it becomes. But to think that like a man is naturally one of these 5 things, or the natural Chad, or else he doesn't have any kind of hope with women, is completely incorrect.
mm-hmm. I mean, we tend to emphasize the natural, you know, those that character who is a big, strong, good looking. That whole archetype is going to probably always rest within us, even though it's changed now, right? I mean, just like you said, if you have the ability to use social media.
Oh yeah, being a manly man still fucking works, even in blue states, man. Women resonate with manly men. It's true.
Yeah. And I mean, that's yeah, like you said, it's never going to change. That is just there. But you know what I'm also really curious about? I mean, you've been doing this for, how long have you been doing this?
PsycHacks has been about 3.5 years now.
PsycHacks, I know, because I've seen you elsewhere discuss that, but your practice as well.
I got licensed, I think, in 2016. So it's been 8 or 9 years as a licensed psychologist, and then several years before that for my training.
So the reason I asked that is because, would you be able to pull apart common mistakes that you see, like the most common things that you see, where you just like, every time you see, you're just like, dude, why are you doing that? Why the fuck are you? Why can't you stop doing it? Like, they just, like, each generation or each group of guys is continually doing this. And if you could just tell guys to stop doing these 3 to 5 things, regardless of what they look like or what they're doing, they would be better off.
Yeah, I made 2 episodes on this subject, one for the 2 sexes. So there's one that says women do the right things with the wrong men, and the other one is that men do the right things with the wrong women. And since you asked me about men, I'll focus on the latter. So basically, most men have had some degree of success with women. They've had some interest in women. Maybe even they've had the experience of being pursued for a relationship by a woman. It's just never the woman that they really want to be pursued by. But like, why does that keep happening to so many guys? Well, how do those men act around those women? Kind of indifferent. Like, they're certainly not pursuing them or hitting them up. They're kind of like, take it or leave it. They tend to be kind of cold, especially around sex. They don't give a bunch of gifts. They don't give a bunch of compliments. They almost kind of feel like they got one foot out the door when they're hanging out with those women. And then once in a while, they meet a real baddie, and they completely change their game. And they think, oh, this is the one. I can't let her get away. I got to tell her exactly how beautiful she is and how much she means to me, and try to lock her down into a relationship as quickly as possible, buy her shit. Like, that baddie is more in your mind than in objective reality. And it's not like the 9s are a different species than the 6s. Like, what works on women as a species on the population level. So all those things that guys were doing with the women that they could kind of take or leave, they also work on the really attractive women. And that's why it's important to kind of have a system. I talk about this, the metaphor I use is playing poker. You play poker, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I have. Not in a while, but for sure.
Yeah, I'm not a professional player by any means, but I grew up in Vegas, so it was hard to avoid it altogether. The thing about poker is the top players have not just a poker face, they have a whole system. They'll look at their cards for 4 seconds, put them down, shuffle their chips 3 times, and then make a decision to either fold, raise, or call. And they do that every time, no matter what their cards look like. Because most hands you don't play in poker. A lot of people don't know that, especially if you haven't bought in on a blind. So you just like are waiting for a good hand. But if you finally get pocket aces, or, suited king, queen, and you start jumping out of your chair and hooting and hollering and changing your betting strategy, you're not going to be able to bring in that pot because you've told to the other people. And what a shame to blow that opportunity. So on some level, you have to, and it's really tough when you're playing poker and you got that good hand. I mean, my heart is just pounding in my chest, and I'm just trying to like not show my emotional response to the other players. But that's kind of how it is for men when they're dealing with really attractive women. You have to let your heart pound, but to keep your system in place, because that's your best possible chance of bringing in the pot.
That's a great way of describing it. And I mean, I see the same thing, just to bring it to my court, within penalty kicks and guys who are also training players versus match days. Every team I've played on, you have a group of guys that during training are the greatest, like the combination of like Messi, Pele, like it's just like you've never seen anything like it. Come game day, this dude he's down in there, and so somehow it's in his head,
Way too in his head. Yeah, I get that. I played soccer as a boy, certainly not at your level, but I would think that it's almost like paper, rock, scissors. The best strategy is to like have no strategy and to be no mind and just sort of be in the moment, wu wei kind of a thing. Because the more that you're like, well, on this, I've played the tape and I'm going to go the upper left-hand corner because I know that's a 37% chance. So it's like, I don't think that generally works. It makes people feel stilted and wooden. And certainly as an athlete, you have to be in the zone. Like the more you can get out of your own way and enter into flow state, the more likely you're going to be successful. The same is true for women, to be honest. A lot of men flub, especially approaches and pickup, because they are too in their head. So the best advice that I can give guys, if they're going to, if they see an attractive woman and they're in the market to meet her, like give yourself permission to approach before you know what you're doing. In my own personal experience, if I wait until I kind of like know what I'm going to say, it's already too late. He who hesitates is lost. So I have to show up and I open my mouth before I know what's going to come out of it. And I've fallen flat on my face a number of times and I've gotten some weird looks and that's about it. But like the more I think about it, one, the less likely I'm actually going to do the approach. And two, if I do screw up the courage, it feels really kind of weird and, kind of inauthentic and creepy. So it's best to just sort of like be loose and stay in the moment and understand that you're just making a connection with another human being. There's nothing scary about her.
Yeah, I love the correlations between all of this and so much. I mean, guys put a lot of emphasis on, getting women and being, and having status or being good at your job and sports and all these things. I love that they're so correlated, that at many times the same mentality, the same principles of being cool, of going into the flow, and letting things happen and acting before you're ready. They all give some level of success to things. Slight switch up because I'm curious about this. I was having a discussion with Brett Weinstein. I always get it wrong, man. These Steins and Steens. I think Brett Weinstein, evolutionary biologist. And the discussion was about man-children. And it seemed...
Man-children, so as a pejorative term.
Yes. As a pejorative,
so
for
guys
sure.
who don't grow up. So the Peter Pan syndrome kind of a thing?
Peter Pan syndrome, you named it. And I just, I said anecdotally, and just kind of, me, this is the only time I've been, an adult in this life form. But it seemed like adult man-childs, that they were on the rise. And they said, he said essentially to me that actually on the female side as well, that there is necessarily, this sort of immature approach towards responsibility in adulthood. And so I'm swinging it to you. What do you think about that? Do you feel that is the case? I mean, I know it's speculation at best, but if it is the case, what do you do about it? And
Well, it depends on what you mean by responsibility. I mean, if you take as markers of responsibility, like having a job, having your own place, having a degree or even a master's degree or beyond, women are doing that. Like, I think across the board, they beat men in the 20s on all three demographics, even income in today's day and age
really,
in major cities for the first time in human history,
Whoa.
a single childless woman under 30 is out earning a single childless man under 30 in like London and New York City.
Okay.
So they're doing very, very well. And I think that what is most attractive to women is diversity of experience. I mean, I would find it very difficult to not be seduced by the opportunities that were laid at my feet or made available to me as a young, even remotely attractive woman. And there is this sense, though it's not loved by men online, that when they're ready to settle down, they can find a guy who's going to be more or less willing to do that. That doesn't always work out, but you can certainly prioritize your career and your travel and your education and your friends and playing the field and et cetera, et cetera. And why not? Nobody was offering those things to me as a young man, so I had to, get on my grind and work for them. But if they were offered to me all the time, from the time I was 18 years old, I might not have gone down the path of responsibility in the sense of I'm going to become a mother, I'm going to get married, I'm going to settle down, even though the 20s are absolutely the best time for women to do that, in the sense of they're more likely to get a high status man in their 20s than in their 30s and beyond. There does seem to be more men who are like living in their parents' basement in their 20s than women. And when I was in my private practice and actively seeing, taking in patients, about a quarter of the folks I was working with, the client was actually the parent, and they were hiring me to speak to their son, who is generally between 25 and 32 years old, to like get out of the house, get interested in women. Don't you want to have a sexual relationship? Don't you want to make money? Don't you want to be able to have the good things in life? And a lot of those guys apparently weren't.
You're breaking my brain here, because I thought that's the plot of one of these movies. I just recently, I think even with Jennifer Lawrence, that's the plot. The parents hire some sort of not someone of your nature. I think they just hired an escort and just told him like, I think that's all.
Dads have been doing that to their sons since the dawn of time, I think.
That's a thing, right? Yeah, but yeah, I find that, and I don't even necessarily mean responsibility in the form of a job and getting some stuff. It's just, I have a friend who states to me perfectly, and he is now engaged. He's articulate and very smart, and that's the thing that I also found. I have two friends that I could be classified as your typical man-child, and one of them is a professional athlete, and he says, I will not take on responsibility until it is pushed on me, until it's forced upon me. And that's how he lives, and he just goes forward until someone pushes him or something pushes him. It's blown up a few times for sure, but for the most part, he's doing tremendous in life. I have to admit, he's doing pretty well. He does not have his own place. He does not have, he lives, the girl earns more than he does, and kind of dictates those decisions on sort of certain things. But otherwise, he's doing fine. It just is an interesting way, I would say. Let's say just for me, who I love to explore and experience, and and I love to have discipline. And in order to do all these things, you have to kind of get yourself, orderly to some degree before you go out and do them. It brings a whole lot of chaos if you don't accept the responsibility before you take some action.
I mean, I think there's something to that. Uh, Baby birds don't fly out of the nest. They're pushed. And of course, it's for the parent to decide when it's time to push. If they get it wrong and are too early, that's obviously very bad for everyone involved. So they have to watch the child very carefully and know when it is ready. But the vast majority of birds don't start flying until they start falling. And then everyone learns real quick how to fly. And that's been very true in my own life. And I've discovered that people who aren't given the chance to fall often don't soar to the highest heights.
Ooh, yeah, that's true. If I keep it on myself, I mean, being an athlete and being an entrepreneur, I mean, the amount of no's that you have to get used to when you're
Sure.
it is absolutely utterly phenomenal. And sometimes, what's even great about it, like when you're an athlete, is that sometimes it would suffice it if you just said, nah, we're good, thank you. But they'll come in with extra no's. No, and I don't like your glasses. And I don't like the shirt you're wearing. I don't like where you're from. Like, this is added shit on top of your stuff. And like, you just got to get used to that. That's just how it is. You're all
Sure.
for the game,
I was an actor before I was a psychologist, and so that I got used to a lot of rejections. As an actor, you get told no 99 times for every time you get hurt, told yes. And it's very personal because the thing that you're selling is yourself, your face, your body, your voice. It's not like you're a visual artist, you're selling a painting, or a musician, you're selling a track. It's very tough to like create a separation between you and the product, which is why so many performers actually have stage names so that they can kind of like keep those two personalities separate.
Sure.
But what's really interesting, I think it's important for people to experience the rejection, to feel the gravity start to catch up with them as they fall. But even success in most fields, it's not security. I mean, at the highest levels, you played in MLS, right? But it's not like you made it and therefore you were tenured. It's like you kind of had to prove that you deserve to be on that team every single game. And if too many games strung together and you weren't carrying your weight, no one's going to have any sympathy for Will J, So I saw this meme on Instagram, but I think it's really great for all kinds of relationships. It was a coach to a baseball player, and the coach sat the player down and said, look, it's my job to find someone better than you. And it's your job to make sure that doesn't happen. Are we clear about that? And in this sense, which is sort of like Aristotelian competition, it's like both people are spurred to be the best possible version of themselves. When there's too much safety, when there's too much security, when people are just guaranteed things and prizes just for participating, I don't think that we achieve nearly as high as we otherwise could. And I don't just mean achievement in the sense of money, though clearly that's part of it. It's achievement in the sense of like developing your latent potential as a human being. Like Hercules wouldn't be Hercules if he wasn't given the trials. Imagine if he didn't have to like fight anything. Like no one would be fucking talking about Hercules. And he probably wasn't grown. It's like, oh man, I got to do this shit again. It's like, you have to see the trial as an opportunity to demonstrate your value, your worth. And a person who's never tested never gets a chance to show that, to first and foremost to himself, but secondly to the world.
But I think so many people have a hard time of understanding that is opportunity. And I would say in my much younger years, you kind of complain, what? Like again, like something, else. And then when you grow to love it and you start heading towards it, I would say that for me is, that took off for me around the 18, 19, 20. I left school. I left college early. I came there to college wanting to study physiology. They didn't have it at my school. I obviously went to the school because of soccer, and they didn't have it. I was in biology. I absolutely enjoyed it. Realized I don't want to do this one day, and was like, I'm going pro, and pushed for that, and pushed for all the languages and all this stuff. And I just, when you hit setbacks, which I've had just plenty, it just seems like it's infinite at times, And when you roll into those, it's just, that's where everything, I would say, as I'm starting to look at it, everything good has come from some obstacle or thing that I've decided, no, I'm not going to take it and keep it the way that it is. You might fail and fall down, and you show perseverance and do all this stuff. But in the end, you've either built some sort of massive attributes, to your name in trying to tackle some problem, or you get over the problem, And so
I think it's well said. I do think that all the successful people I know have a bit of a masochistic streak where they kind of learn to love the pain and they learn to love the struggle. And until they kind of accommodate themselves emotionally to that reality, there's too much friction between them and the inevitable rejection and setback that happens when you try to do anything in this world. So on some level, it's like by choosing it, you own it and you make it yours and it's no longer your enemy. I think there's something to that. But I also think that, if someone came to me in the depths of my despair and said, "Hey, Orion, one day this is going to be really good for you and you'll make a business out of this," I would probably punch him in the face. So there's also like a time and a place for that kind of attitude as well.
Absolutely. I've got another, this one I've had on my head ever since it's become a thing. And, we had, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, interviewed someone, she's passed away now, actually, very, very young, in her 20s. Her name is Ida Hasselblad. And during COVID, I was in Sweden, in Stockholm. And so it was actually quite interesting because they didn't have lockdown, and I have a very different experience to COVID than the rest of the world. But she found herself all over the news because of some party. Think like a Paris Hilton type stunt back in those days, something along those lines. I can't remember right now.
But in Sweden during COVID?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So
some sort of wild.
People around the world were very judgmental of that, I'm sure.
Very, very, very. Yeah. It landed her in all sorts of hot water. I had her on the podcast to discuss. The reason I bring her up, though, is because at the time she had a large, very, very, very large following on Snapchat. And OnlyFans was just getting ready to get going, or was going, right about that time. And she, off camera, said, "No, I don't want to do this, but I'm thinking about it." If you fast forward, she did end up doing not OnlyFans, which I think she called it promo or some sort of, something Snapchat, I don't know, where people pay, obviously, for essentially naked pictures of her or whatever else she was doing behind the paywall. And so having discussed with her, the reason that she did that was just because it was just too good. It was just too lucrative, and this whole movement and thing, how is this affecting men? How are we to deal with this OnlyFans thing? What do you think about it? And how are we supposed to be dealing with this as men? Out of my friend group, I don't know anyone, maybe someone's not saying it, I don't know anyone that's consuming or paying for it.
You probably do, but I don't think that they're going to own up to it. Like, there's just so many men on this platform. They outnumber the content creators, I think, like by orders of magnitude. Like, there's 100 consumers of content of OnlyFans to every one content creator.
Oh, wow.
And it's overwhelmingly women that are the creators, obviously.
Sure.
And I do talk about this at the end of the book, that it's really interesting that organically, through no one's real intention, there's this virtual sexual marketplace that has grown up in the last few years that like completely mirrors the incentives that go into the real life sexual marketplace that has evolved over, millennia of human history through no real design. Like, if this were all just social construction, that would be very strange. But like, it just organically came about that men exchange resources for sexual opportunity and women are exchanging sexual opportunity for resources. And it's like, if it were the other way around, I don't think that we'd be talking about OnlyFans today. No one would know about it.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a corroboration of what is at the heart of the transaction in the sexual marketplace. I do think that it's very easy to be judgmental about what's going on, but I think that kind of misses the point, because all this does is reveal a dynamic or an intention that I think has been at the heart of human coupling for thousands and thousands of years. Now it's just being done in our faces with greater convenience and at scale. So it's so much easier to see, but it was there all along. I have this line where potentially for the first time in human history, I mean, women have always wanted to be millionaires, right? But for the first time in human history, it might be easier for the average woman to get $1 from a million men than to get $1 million from one. And I got to say, that would be very tempting for me as a young woman. Like these are numbers that I haven't even seen after decades of working assiduously in all kinds of, high status professions. Especially like, I mean, if I was a 19-year-old girl, it'd be hard not to sell feet pics. I'll tell you that. You don't even have to show your face.
Right?
I just make another 50 grand a month by taking pictures of my feet. It'd be like, okay, whatever.
I know. That's exactly what I'm thinking. It's just like it would be, and I used to make fun of, because I have a friend who ran one of the largest modeling agencies in Croatia, and the makeup influencers in that, like these girls they throw money at them. They throw money at them. The makeup influencers and beauty and all those things. Whereas, we've got to jump around, do this, that, and the other. Our copy's got to be all special and all this stuff. And it was just fascinating to see. It's just what a different setup it is for you guys.
Yeah, that's why I can't judge these women so much, because I really struggle with what that would be like for me if from the time I was 18, I was getting invited to Dubai and I was getting offers of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and men were just wanting to buy me dinners and trips, and like I'd probably drop out of school. I don't think I would become a psychologist. I don't think I would have started a YouTube channel unless that would have gave me access to even more patrons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It just seems, it's a fascinating thing. My biggest concern, if I do have a concern with it, is that because of the ease of it, I worry for guys not cultivating the things that we just talked about. Are they not doing what we just said? Because, it's important that you learn how to fail. It's important that you learn how to talk to a girl. It's important that you get better as a guy. You learn your own boundaries. All those things are important. And if you have a subscription to, I don't even know, like all of this, and that or they're paid to talk to you all the time, you don't develop. And that over time seems like a problem to me. That's my biggest thing. I don't know if that's going to happen, because clearly some guys are probably, 50-50. They're not all consumed. Not every man who's on OnlyFans is consumed with the app or whatever. But, over a generation and such, if it, that option was not there.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think in general, convenience tends to make people weaker. And we don't need more weak men in today's day and age, for sure. Now, it's also problematic because men who engage, I mean, this is more than pornography, because you can actually interact with these women and potentially have virtual relationships with them. And if that's your exclusive benchmark with respect to intersexual relationships, you're not going to know what the fuck to do when you meet a real woman. Because like saying, oh, the OnlyFans girl that I'm paying likes me and does these things for me and says all these charming things, that must mean that I'm a sexy, charming guy. You talk to a woman that you're not paying, just like some random woman on the street, they're difficult, man. It's like the difference between, talking to somebody if you're the employer versus like you're the employee, and just thinking that if you have one side of it, you know how to handle the other side. And most women are very difficult to seduce and to get into relationships with. They're complicated, imperfect human creatures. And that's, a woman who just wants to take your money is going to be sweet as pie. So you don't notice that the funds are leaving your wallet on some level, like especially if the honey is what gets you to pay more. So it does lead men to potentially have, I think men kind of know that the average woman is much more difficult. And so they just give up. They just think, oh, to me, I've never had one of these virtual relationships. But again, if I was 20 years younger, could I get ensnared in this type of thing? Sure. Like, I don't want to pretend that I'm so virtuous and better. I just was born too late to, I think, get involved in this kind of stuff. But I think a lot of these young guys, they just sort of like, what's the point? Like, the average woman is actually not as physically attractive and is a lot more expensive and is much more difficult to relate to. So I'll just pay. And it's not quite the same thing, but I get less of what I don't want. Let's put it that way. I get less of what I don't want than with the average woman on the street.
Yeah. It's tough. I have. Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, man.
You good?
This has been a great talk. We can keep going.
Okay. All right. I'll throw some more. I'll throw another scenario at you. I threw one of my other friends. I'm gonna throw one of my best friends. You remember the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin?
I haven't seen it. I've seen clips because is it Ryan Gosling? Is he the
Oh, I don't know. I know
sexy
Steve
guy?
Carell.
Or is that
It's been
Crazy Stupid
forever.
Love?
It's been forever. That movie was like 25 years ago. I feel like.
So I do know it's Steve Carell, and he
Yeah.
does get some help getting laid, I think. And I think the clips I've seen of that were really good, actually.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, it delves within every single theme that we have talked about. If you haven't seen it, you definitely should.
All right.
And I haven't seen it for a long time, but it's a movie theme for this podcast. I have a friend who is in that area, and if you could say anything to someone who is, let's say, a virgin, never really had a relationship later in life, what would you do? And now I'm going to give you one small caveat. I know you're not reading, you're not literally giving him advice, but just a hypothetical creature who is a virgin and never had a proper relationship with a woman. And they have a lot of anxiety.
Sure.
They have high anxiety.
I still get anxiety, and I've been with plenty of women. Like, but maybe the anxiety is also excitement, though. Like, those two emotions are physiologically indistinguishable, and it's our mind that cognitively labels it as one or the other. But it's the same physical process. So maybe he's just really excited. That reframe has helped me to keep my cool when I was under, stimulating circumstances.
Yeah. I wonder. I hope for the best for him. I could care less what he decides, right? I don't care. I want my friend to be happy. But, it's an interesting theme. I don't spend a lot of time talking about that. But, being in that frame, I obviously can't offer any advice. Any advice that I can, but it just doesn't make any sense. I'm just out of curiosity what you would say to someone who has to, like, okay, I would like to be in a relationship. This has never happened. Would I go and run through my qualities and be like, okay, I've got this quality, this quality, this quality. Like, how do you do it for guys that would seem, because maybe this can make it even more relatable?
I don't think you can really develop that kind of confidence by looking in the mirror and fluffing yourself up and speaking mantras. And I think you gain that confidence by actually doing the thing, like anything else. And I would just tell this hypothetical person that it's going to be terrifying potentially, and that's okay. Maybe he's done scary things in other respects before, and he knows that it's often not as scary as it may appear on the other side. And that the more he does the thing, the less fearful he likely becomes. I mean, that's functionally what exposure therapy is, which is the frontline treatment for all kinds of phobias, and which are basically aversive disorders, So you have to come into contact with the thing enough times over a long enough period of time that it sort of loses its fearful salience. I'm not saying this is for everybody, but I remember reading in the book Brothel, which was about the legalized professional prostitution in the state of Nevada, that probably about I'm going to get the number wrong, but a not insignificant proportion of the clientele were virgins who hired a prostitute or an escort just to get through that experience. I've worked with guys who weren't virgins per se, but had very little sexual experience because they married young and just had one partner. And they hired escorts to kind of work through sexual confidence with them, especially if they approach it from that level. I'm sure a lot of women would love to teach a guy how to please a woman.
Sure. Wow, that's interesting. That's a different approach. I mean, not a different approach. It's a logical approach in many ways, because that's the way you would do it with something else if you're learning some other skill.
I lucked out. When I was a young man, I had a number of lovers who were older women. So in my early 20s, I had a number of lovers who were in their late 30s, early 40s. And they were wonderful. I still have a lot of respect and affection for those women. And they were great because, women of all ages kind of just expect guys to know what to do. And we don't. In health class, we learned about the vas deferens and herpes. It's like no one tells us how to get a girl wet and to get her off. So and to be honest, a lot of young women, they haven't yet learned, how do I put this, to titrate their venom. They can be very sharp and very judgmental, versus older women, they still have that, but they've learned to kind of temper that. They've softened it. with some maturity. And so if you approach an older woman in the right way, she can be a wonderful teacher, maybe even better than she found you. And the same can go the other way around too.
What would be your biggest takeaway from them? What would you take away? You know,
I think probably the most important thing I learned from those women is to take your time as a guy. It's like so often men are laser focused on penetrative intercourse. And obviously that feels really good and it's a lot of fun, but getting there is also a lot of fun too, if you can enjoy the journey.
Last question. One of the videos and one of the things that actually I loved, and I think it may be your most popular video, so you've probably grown tired of talking about it, but I think it's so important and so useful as advice. I'd love to give more people an opportunity. Obviously, we'll link to it, but how to be a man. I know it's probably resonated with so many people because we seem to have an issue with that in society, just in general. And you touch on that, but I think virtually every guy can kind of put their finger on it. We've had a lot of people stand up in the last few years to become this, and the reason that they're having certain success, whether that's Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, some of these other names out there, can definitely claim that, is because there is that uncertainty over what it is to be a man. And you give an excellent assessment, in my opinion. So maybe if you want to throw that out there.
Yeah, thanks, Will. I think that is the top performing episode on the channel of all time so far. And it's kind of strange because I'm not the manliest guy in the world. I work in a very feminine profession. I tend to be an introvert. I don't have this long beard. I don't have six-pack abs. I don't tower over my intersexual competition. So it might sound strange to get this kind of advice from a guy like me. But I'm also tougher than I look in a lot of respects. So what I talk about in the episode is that to be a man, you need two things. You need to have a spine and you need to have a pair. You need to have some balls. And if you have those two things, you're a man. And I mention that because a lot of what's happening in the content space these days has to do with what I call performative masculinity. It's like, think about, we just passed Christmas. Think about all the shit men, like, goes for men's gifts. It's like hunting knives and whiskey and cigars and hatchets, like all the, it's like, what am I going to do with some of that stuff? So there's many ways to be a man. You don't have to have this long beard. You don't have to be a lumberjack. You don't have to be a fireman. You don't have to be a cowboy. Those are obviously archetypes that still resonate with us. But, and I think all those archetypes that do resonate because those men had spine and a pair. I love the trope of the Western hero. We don't have a lot of Westerns anymore, right? But like the single gunslinger who went up against the bad guys, even though he was probably going to get killed just because it was the right fucking thing to do. I mean, that takes a real big pair. And we saw in recent history a lot of people fold under significantly less pressure from, friends and family and employers and things like that. So I think it's really important for guys to have a spine, which is basically like the ability and willingness to stand up for something. And say, this is what I believe. And this is why I think it's really important for me when I do my podcast is I use my real face as I use my real name. There's a lot of content creators on the internet that are in this space. They hide their face. They use pseudonyms. And I think that's to a discredit because even they're saying with their approach that there's something almost shameful about what they're doing. Like they don't want to put their name and their face to their beliefs. And I think that undermines a lot of the good content that some of these creators do put out there. It's too easy to attack the person who's already hiding. It's like, what, so it's like being willing to say the thing, even if it's unpopular, to do the thing, even if it means losing your friends or opportunities or money or even your life. And that's where the balls come in. It's like to be able to actually, not in a hypothetical situation, but to put your money on the felt and say, I'm willing to stand up for this, even if it means that I lose. And I think that's what people respect. And I think that you can't really be respectable as a man if you're not willing to do those things on some level. Like, it's very hard to look up to a guy who just wants people to like him.
That guy does not. By no stretch of the imagination would anyone call that guy probably a man. I think that's almost like a childlike, at least in my eyes, like a childlike desire.
I understand that. There's this pull inside of me that wants to be liked, of course, and I have to wrestle with that when it comes time to put my money on the table.
Right, but you have that limit. You have that limit. I can't. There would be a point at which the liking thing would go away, and the okay.
Well, I guess my life, which has not always been easy, has prepared me for this because I've been disliked and rejected by a lot of people in my life, and I've lived through all of it from a very early age. So it's like I'm used to it. I'm used to people kind of like turning away from me because of my beliefs or my stances. So, at this stage of the game, it's kind of child's play from all the practice I've had.
Well, listen, man, this has been incredible. We nailed a lot of what I wanted to discuss, and I know we've been trying to plan and figure out. We're miles and miles apart, and we're about to be an ocean apart. But I will be back here.
Where are you now? You're in Missouri, is that right?
I'm in Kansas. I'm actually in Kansas City. This studio here is where we shoot a lot of our football and soccer, stuff. But for now I'm here, and it was just in New York, obviously, as we watched the beginning of this podcast, and then I'm normally in Europe. Normally in around Zagreb, Croatia. I do a lot of work with a company.
I went to Croatia for the first time this year. What a beautiful country.
Isn't it awesome? Did you go to the coast?
Yeah, in Zagreb, which was my least favorite town that I went to. But like the Dalmatian coast, wow, that is just incredible.
Unreal. Yeah, so yeah, I'm in and around and over there, but I'll probably be back over here, obviously, some more. So we will sort it out. But please hold up your book again. We were going to link to that book. We will link to PsycHacks, of course. Is there anywhere else that you want us to put or send anyone?
All of my stuff is in the description of every single episode. So if people go to PsycHacks on YouTube, they will get all the good stuff. My book is called The Value of Others. There's an ebook, audiobook, and obviously a paperback. I would encourage you to check it out. It's over 400 pages long. It's dense and I think meaningful. So it's not necessarily as easy to understand as the YouTube videos. My goal in writing this was to kind of give a definitive stance on the subject that would still be relevant a century from now. Whether I succeed or not, we'll have to see, but that's sort of what I was going for. I also have a paid members community called the Captain's Quarters that if you want more access to me, that is a good place to start. But this has been great, Will. Really fun talk. I hope that we do get to do this in person one of these days, and thanks for reaching out and giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll definitely make it happen one of these days. Guys, go check out everything, and we will see you guys later.